All right, 40K enthusiasts, we are continuing our discussion here with deployment in 40K, deployment models. What are you trying to do turn one when the game starts to gain maximum momentum for your army? And we're trying to make that bridge from concept, theory hammer, math hammer to actual application on the tabletop. And the only way I can really do that is follow up on comments, which I welcome and I always appreciate on my blog, and also give some real world examples of my various 40K armies and how they work in deployment with what they're trying to do. I started with my Footdar, my Space Elf Eldar Footdar army, because that's kind of Horde. People don't think of Eldar as Horde, but they can. So I thought that was a great extreme. Now on the opposite end, the opposite extreme, we're going to look at an elite army in my Grey Knights. And I define elite as small model count, small numbers, an elite strike force, task force, really expensive, really potent models, but you can't afford to take any losses in 40K. Now, elite is all subjective. You know, I could play a Tyranid elite army and have like 100 models on there. The kind of round lists making the round around here right now are, I knew I would be vindicated one day by having like dozens and dozens of Carnifexes. You know, everyone thought Nidzilla was dead. Well, Nidzilla is back, but essentially running massive warrior spam. I knew keeping those 24 warriors would come in handy one day. Warrior spam, Carnifex spam, and Hive Guard spam. Just, putting out that ability to move fast and just have all those wounds and have all that kind of punch on there. It's a pretty tricky list with that. So would that be an elite army? Yeah, it's an elite army, but it out-hordes some lesser horde armies on there. So it depends on the points, depends on what you're trying to play. The idea behind my Grey Knight army, here's kind of the units in there, and they change a little bit, scaling up or down for points, but essentially at its core, 2 Land Raiders, 2 Dreadnoughts, 2 to 4 strike squads, 1 to 2 Terminator squads. HQ, completely subjective. One of the things that we'll pause for a second here and kind of sidetrack HQ choices, active versus passive. Active HQ choices are ones that directly affect the game. Some sort of chapter master, some sort of crazy jacked up, swarm lord or something like that goes in and just tries to butcher as many models as you can. You know it's successful if you run a simple math hammer formula of my HQ costs 200 points, my Khornate Lord, right? Great example. Murder Sword, love the Murder Sword. Juggy, all jacked up for Khorne. I don't even know how much he costs. Let's say he costs 200 points. Probably costs more than that. I do the simple calculation at the end of the game. If he killed more than 2,000 points and he kept you busy and he frustrated you and he took enough skulls, hey, it was worth it. If turn one, which happened a little while ago, got very sad face because he got blown off the table turn one, very sad face, he did not make the points back. That's an active. You're actively going out. A passive HQ, great example that I can think of is like a Farseer or Sorcerer. Certainly certain HQs can affect in combat, but HQs that can hand out buffs like candy and kind of buff your overall army. So certainly by taking an HQ, you can radically alter or support the tactics of your army tremendously. So in building my Grey Knight army, the units that I've locked down, it differs from all my other army builds where the HQ is prominent. It's not reliant on any single HQ choice. I can swap them in and out without having to change the army tactica at all. And I did this on purpose because while I'm playing my favorite models for Space Marines, I need to play Land Raiders, I need to play Dreadnoughts, I need to play Marines in some capacity, and I need to play Assault Marines, I need to play Terminators. Just every Marine list has always had this. It bleeds over to Chaos too. Loyalists and Traitor Marines on there. Taking all those units with my Grey Knights, I wanted to make sure, so I have some diversity of fun, of narrative. If I want to build a little Hero Hammer list or do that, I can take whatever HQ choice I want. As opposed to my, say, Chaos list, my Khornate Glory list, the Lord is there for the narrative and for the Khorne lulls, but he's still there as a driving force, the backbone of the tactica of delivering it. and kind of affecting things in your deployment zone. So in the list, those are the units for it, an elite list. So right away with an elite list, you need to immediately lose game turns, burn game turns, in that if a game, let's say on average, I know some people play random game length still. I know some people play a fixed game length. I know some tournaments, they will have a fixed game length, so everyone has to play to the end, so it's consistent over a number of turns. Let's just say your local meta right now is you are going to play 6 turns of 40K. If you have an elite army, you are already down in the model count. You don't want to really engage your opponent. You can only kill so much with an elite army, even if they're jacked up, even if they're super powerful, because your volume of dice is limited by the smaller number of units on there. So with that, if I start taking losses turn 1, that really magnifies things. And also in 40K, there's this moment where I'm moving, you're moving, we're moving, and then we finally hit in the midfield. We finally hit. The game really starts rolling dice and removing handfuls of models. That starts turn 2, and it tends to kind of magnify turn 3. Then by turn 4, 5, and 6, we're like, we don't have much left. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, it's crazy good, but it's crazy. With an elite army, when we make that contact point on whatever turn that's going to be, it's got to happen based on the mission goals, because you're certainly not going to sit around and let me not try to win mission parameters. I can't take any losses ahead of time. You know, I can't really lose stuff going in or lose stuff to some suicide squads on there or siphon units, because then I'm not going to have critical model mass to be able to deal with you. So it's almost like turn 1, turn 2, I want to hurt you, but I don't really want to be hurt as best I can. That's what you're looking at for an elite army. You also are not able, you don't want to move across the table, spending a turn or 2 moving across the table, because your opponent, who is most likely going to outnumber you, they're just going to sit there and shoot. But you have this duality of you have to get across the table. So here's how we kind of do this with deployment. I put down the 2 Land Raiders. I put down the Dreadnoughts. Usually it's a las cannon Dreadnought. And I have strike squads in both Land Raiders. The other strike squads, the Terminators, they may deploy. They may deep strike. They may go into reserves. Kind of depends on the mission. But the idea is we have multi-wound, heavy vehicles with lots of las cannons that have range, volume of dice, punch, and I try to utilize cover as best I can, meaning try to park the vehicle in there, try to angle things off as best I can. I will go on either the left or right side of the table. I will castle up. Castle up means literally the table edge, the corner, you castle up in there. So this way, I've limited the avenues of approach for you, my opponent, and I've made it harder for you to attack, at least if I'm on the left side of the table, my left side, physically up against that. I've made it harder for you to attack that left side. I'm trying to narrow down where you're coming. And I just sit there and I shoot. My target priority kind of changes. It's this kind of matrix. If I can, based on the mission, if there's units that you have that I need to take out, I'll start shooting the las cannons at them. If there's units that I can easily kill, even if they're lower value, maybe I'll start shooting at them. So you just start taking model losses right away. So now you're like, well, I got to close. I got to get in there, because the way you get volume of dice, yes, you'll have some long-range stuff, but Land Raiders and Dreads are pretty tough in this edition. So you close. You come across the table with some of your units or all your units. And at that point, I riposte by moving the Land Raiders forward, getting out all the Grey Knights in there, possibly bringing down other units, or kind of pushing my Terminators and my strike squads on foot forward for that layered fire. That is how the deployment of this army works. Kind of deploying out and castling up and staying. I don't want to say no deployment, but there is deployment. Get you to move to the midfield so that when I cross to the midfield on turn 2 or 3, which is that contact point, I have significant model mass. I can try and deal as much volume of dice damage as I can with all those storm bolters and the assault and everything. And hopefully by not marching to the middle of the table, turn 1 and turn 2, which I do with a lot of my other armies, you're just not sitting back plinking away, taking out my, let's see, on average, 10, 20, 30, 35, 36, 37, 38, 40 models, around 40 to 50 models. That's not a lot for Space Marines on there. So I really need to use deployment to protect myself as best as I can. So we've looked at Footdar, we've looked at Grey Knights, we looked at the Horde, we looked at the Elite. We're going to look at my Samhan Warhost, Speed. We're going to look at my Necron army, which is Tomb Kings in space, long live the old world, with a mix of some speed. We're going to look at my Berserkers of Scalathrax, and we're going to look at my Red Templars, a.k.a. Brotherhood of the Sword. Harlequin army, we'll look at some point. That and Tyranids are still very much a work in progress. I'm still kind of feeling my way. They've certainly been rebooted for 8th, and while I've been experimenting with them, and we do have to cover some podcasts with it, I don't feel like I can commit and steer you guys into some Tactica to try out just quite yet. It's still way too experimental with that.